As we all know, sexual activity declines with age, and this is nothing new. But the current situation is different. Couples today are having sex far less frequently than couples of the same age a generation ago. What used to happen once a week is now once or twice a month, and for many, not at all. The problem isn't limited to the marital relationship. When sex is absent, relationships weaken, health suffers, families face problems, and the consequences for society are dire. In this video, I'll discuss exactly what's happening, why marital sex is declining so rapidly, and why this matters. Hello, I'm a marriage counselor and coach in the UK. I help couples build vibrant, connected, and incredibly fulfilling relationships. If you're new here, welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you. How common are sexless marriages today? You've probably heard the statistic that 1 in 5 marriages is sexless. This is often interpreted to mean that 4 out of 5 couples have sex frequently. But this isn't necessarily true, as the statistics only include extreme cases where couples have sex less than 10 times a year. So if you have sex only once a month, you won't even appear in these statistics. To clarify, the absence of sex in the research doesn't mean it's completely absent. This is just a technical definition, but let's face it, having sex once a month still feels like a marriage devoid of intimacy to many. Try asking 100 middle-aged married men how good their sex lives are, and you'll hear silence from more than 1 in 5. Statistics confirm this. The UK's National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Patterns revealed that couples aged 35 to 44 have sex an average of 2 to 3 times a month. For those aged 45 to 54, this drops to once or twice a month most often. A third of respondents indicated they have no sex at all. 0. Nothing. Keep in mind that these figures may be an underestimate, as people are often reluctant to talk about sex, especially when it comes to our minds. Let's give you a more optimistic answer. The rate of marriages devoid of intimacy is probably much worse. Keep that in mind the next time someone passes you on the street. Now let's imagine this. How does today compare to a generation ago? We all know the 90s were better. Culture, entertainment, freedom. Well, at least when it comes to sex, the statistics are consistent. Back then, people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s were the most sexually active. And in the 2000s, regular sexual activity doubled among those aged 35 to 44. This isn't just in the UK. Studies from the US, Australia, and the Nordic countries show the same thing. Since the beginning of the 21st century, the frequency of sexual activity with a partner has declined by between 15 and 28% over the past few decades. Looking back, this is a long-term trend. For most of the 20th century, couples had sex roughly once a week, but since the 1990s, this has dropped to only 2 or 3 times a month. This dramatic rise and fall illustrates how recent and unusual this change is. Why is sexual activity declining? In the 1990s and earlier, people went out more, frequented bars, clubs, and social gatherings, and most worked in person. This social interaction provided more opportunities to form relationships. Today, our more isolated lives make it harder than ever to form a committed relationship. For those capable of building long-term relationships, the pace of modern life can be grueling. Couples juggle work, children, bills, and endless to-do lists. Unlike in the past, both partners often work full-time and share household chores. Couples frequently fall asleep after half a bottle of wine, wondering why their sex life has declined. Speaking of phones, these little things are draining the vitality from relationships. Evenings we used to spend together are now consumed by Netflix, TikTok, and empty chatter. Couples sit in the same room, but they aren't truly together, just as caged animals stop interacting when deprived of healthy stimulation. I suspect this digital disconnection is having the same effect on us. Researchers now indicate that digital distractions are among the biggest threats to intimate relationships. What do you think? Are screens ruining your relationship? Share your opinion in the comments. There's also the rapidly spreading pornography, which has altered sexual habits and expectations. Some people turn to pornography as a substitute for sexual problems in their relationships. But over time, this distancing can widen the gap between spouses. Another trend is the decline in testosterone levels among men today compared to their fathers or grandfathers of the same age. Contributing factors include obesity, lack of sleep, sedentary lifestyles, chronic stress, and environmental chemicals that disrupt hormonal balance. This means that the average man's desire for sex is lower today. However, none of those present agreed with this view. Overprescription is another significant factor. Antidepressant use has increased by more than a third in the UK since 2015, and in the US from 8% in 1999 to nearly 14% in 2018. Even teenagers are now being prescribed twice the amount they were in the mid-2000s. Among the many problems with these drugs is their well-known negative impact on libido. Furthermore, there is a clear lack of marriage laws or moral guidance in our contemporary culture. In the past, marriage was taken seriously, and couples were supported. Communities, extended families, and even churches taught couples how to make their marriages work. I'm not saying those institutions were always positive, but for centuries there was a deep-seated cultural acceptance that sex is important and that neglecting it undermines family stability. Today, these support systems have largely disappeared, and I fear we've squandered it all. Couples today are more isolated than ever. The result is that sex is now widely viewed as merely a physical, even unnecessary activity, while emotional connection is prioritized. Of course, emotional connection is important, but the consequence is that sex is no longer widely seen as a legitimate desire. This is linked to another recent cultural shift: individualism. We hear endless talk about prioritizing ourselves, but in the process, we've lost sight of the language of commitment, generosity, and partnership. The focus has shifted to what we have to offer, not what we deserve. This is clearly reflected in how we satisfy our sexual needs. To make matters worse, single life is marketed as an endless procession of freedom and love, while marriage is portrayed as sexually boring. Of course, studies show that intimacy in long-term relationships is deeper, more fulfilling, and more connected than casual flings. Unfortunately, many couples believe this myth and accept it as inevitable. The main goal of this channel is to demonstrate that marriage, if properly nurtured, can be an incredibly rich and rewarding life experience. So, if you want to support my message, click subscribe, because we need stronger marriages now more than ever. Finally, this is a fierce battle between the sexes. The lack of trust between men and women is a tragedy, and the simplistic statements made online are fueling resentment on both sides. Whether it's from the red pill movement or the feminist wave, they are both damaging each other. But when it comes to sex and marriage, modern feminism has completely dismissed the idea of its necessity. The notion that we men need sex emotionally is ridiculed and ignored. Men are often seen as superficial or inept at expressing their sexual desires, rather than as beings programmed for sexual communication. The result is that trust has become harder to find than ever before, and whether in romantic relationships or marriage, the desire for commitment is gradually fading. So, where is this heading? If these trends continue, we are heading toward a world where the absence of intimacy in marriage becomes the norm, where the lack of intimacy, once seen as a warning sign, can be easily ignored, a very dangerous situation for society. Because intimacy, even just once a week, is linked to greater happiness, stability, and resilience in a marriage. Its absence leads to increased resentment, emotional distance, and a significantly higher risk of divorce. From a health perspective, intimacy is not merely a pleasurable pastime like bowling or going to the movies. It also reduces stress, boosts immunity, and promotes psychological resilience. People deprived of their agency often become lonely, anxious, and ill. Children also suffer when their parents are classmates. Closeness between parents fosters a sense of security and demonstrates what healthy adult relationships should be like. Therefore, when this tangible connection is lost, children often develop patterns of distrust and instability in their own relationships, which they then pass on to their own children. And so the birth cycle begins. Finally, if we look at the societal level, we observe a decline in birth rates in most developed countries. In the United Kingdom, it is 1.5, in the United States 1.6, and in South Korea only 0.7. Experts warn that this means an aging population, a shrinking workforce, and increasing pressure on pension and healthcare systems with long-term economic consequences. I don't want to exaggerate, but if the downturn continues, and recent data suggests it will, the consequences could be dire for those left to recover. So what can be done? The good news is that it's not out of our control. You can guess what I mean. Yes, have more sex. Couples who choose to prioritize sex and intimacy over drifting along are part of the solution. By the way, I don't recommend this for couples with serious marital problems. But in many marriages, the main problem is a lack of sex. Therefore, the obvious solution is often to increase intimacy. I've seen some couples do more than simply reprioritize intimacy. There's no major therapeutic breakthrough, no problems, just a conscious choice. The immediate results are less conflict, less stress, more love, and better communication. We need to stop pretending that intimacy doesn't make a difference, because it does. And if you understand its importance as I do, you can argue with those around you that they are wrong because they are wrong. Sex is not just a reward for those who deserve it. It is one of the things that makes us healthy and fulfilled. It is a beautiful, vital force that nourishes love, generosity, art, music, and creativity. If sex declines globally, we will all suffer. I'm not saying sex is the answer to everything. I know it won't solve everything, but I do believe that a world with more communication between men and women and more intimate relationships would be a better world for all of us. So don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. This means choosing your partner instead of your phone. It means addressing any issues in your relationship that are holding you back. It means talking, being physically connected, and rebuilding the connection. Make intimacy a regular, conscious habit, not just a monthly event, but a long list of difficult occasions. Take good care of your health so you don't become so exhausted or ill that you can't prioritize intimacy. Think about sex. Think about basic human needs like love, respect, and emotional intimacy. Finally, reject divisive gender ideas. They are antithetical to life. Men and women are a complete and wonderful team that has evolved over millions of years. So make an effort to connect and collaborate. It all starts with you, one couple at a time. What brought us together here in the first place is a fundamental movement to address the disagreements that have arisen. I know this is easier said than done. So, if you need support, book a session with me via the link in the description. If you found this message helpful, subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. I post new videos every week. If you enjoyed this video, check out my video about why a marriage without intimacy is still a healthy marriage. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Until then, be honest with yourselves and others.